If you watched our last video, you know the first thing that we're going to do to evaluate these double angle formulas or expressions is to draw a triangle. And the way they're telling us which quadrant to draw the triangle in this time is different than we did before. This time they tell me the tangent is less than 0, which is really just a fancy way of saying that the tangent of our angle is going to be negative. Also, they're showing me that the sine is positive. They're giving me the sine ratio. And so I know my triangle is going to be in the quadrant where sine is positive but tangent's negative. And so going back and remembering this, the ASTC thing, the quadrant that this is going to work in where sine is positive but tangent's negative is going to be quadrant 2. So they're telling me my quadrant, or my triangle, is going to be drawn in quadrant 2. Okay, so I'll go ahead and draw that in. And then they've also given me two sides of that triangle. From here, the problem's going to be very similar to last time. I've got the opposite side, I've got the hypotenuse. So I'll add those two sides to my triangle. The opposite side would be 3 square root of 2, and the hypotenuse is going to be 5. So finding my missing side, it's not a triple, so I will have to do Pythagorean theorem. So I'm going to call the missing side x. So x squared plus 3 square root of 2 squared, and if you're typing that in your calculator, make sure you use parentheses, would equal 5 squared. Of course, the 5 squared is fine, that's just 25. When you do 3 square root of 2 squared, you can do that in the calculator. Otherwise, the trick that I like to do is I just do the outside number times the outside number times the inside number. You're really just distributing the squared. And so 3 times 3 times 2 gets me 18 for that piece right there. And so x squared plus 18 would be 25. If I subtract 18 from both sides, I get 7. And so then x must be the square root of 7. However, that missing side is not the square root of 7. Remember, we will manually have to add negative signs. If that side's ever going to the left or going down, I have to make sure I manually make that side negative. It's going in the negative direction. So now that my triangle is all filled out, I can find the sine and cosine of just theta, and then I'll go ahead and use my double angle formulas to find the sine and cosine of 2 theta. Okay, so the sine of theta is the opposite over the hypotenuse, which is 3 square root of 2 over 5. We already knew that, they gave it to us at the beginning. The cosine of theta is going to be negative square root of 7 over 5. And so now that everything is in place, I can go ahead and answer the questions. If you need the formulas, hopefully you have them in your notes, or you can go back and watch the last video. The sine of 2 times theta, using my formula, is the same thing as 2 times the sine of theta, which is 3 square root of 2 over 5, times the cosine of theta, which is negative square root of 7 over 5. And so I'll go ahead and multiply everything along the top of the fraction. If you want to make it over 1, that's fine. When you multiply these radicals, all the numbers outside the square root would multiply, so the 2 times the 3 times the negative 1 is going to give me a negative 6 out front, and then all the numbers inside the square root would multiply together, so negative 6 square root of 14, and then multiply any numbers along the bottom, so 5 times 5 gets me 25. So there's going to be the sine of 2 times theta, negative 6 times the square root of 14 over 25. And try to simplify it, try to see if you can break down your square root and simplify it. You can't. See if you can simplify that fraction, negative 6 over 25. You can't, but I would definitely check for those things. Okay? And then to get cosine of 2 times theta, the formula is to take the cosine and square it, so negative square root of 7 over 5 squared, minus the sine squared. So we had 3 square root of 2 squared over 5. And remember, to square a fraction, you just square the top and bottom separately. So in the top of this, negative square root of 7 times negative square root of 7 is positive 7 over 25. That will always come out positive. Minus 3 square root of 2 squared. Remember, that's still the same thing as what we had before. That's still going to be 18. You can use a calculator or use my trick. Remember, it's outside times inside. So 3 times 3 times 2 would get you 18 over 25. And finally, add those two fractions, or subtract the two fractions in this case. 7 minus 18 is negative 11 over 25, which can't be simplified, and so there's our cosine of 2 times theta.